George magazine was one of the worst magazines ever, ever. It was humorless. It wasn't smart. It wasn't clever. It wasn't interesting.
That was a quote from Maureen Callahan. And I have so many other things I should be doing, but I just watched her 20 some minute video talking about the JFK Jr. documentary on CNN. And I just listened to her rant and rave for that entire 20 minutes. And I just have some things to say. This is my reaction to Maureen Callahan's video about JFK Jr. Number one, there's ads every 2 minutes. I'm anxious to see how much money she makes on that one video of just word vomit, completely trashing JFK Jr. and his life, and many of the people that were in that documentary who spoke highly of him. God forbid someone say something good about him. But yeah, I'm just wondering how much money she made on that video when I had to click skip ad every 2 to 3 minutes in her video. And again, it was only 20 minutes long, and I had like probably 5 to 6 ads, so that's cool. One thing she talked about was Steve Gillen and how Steve Gillen had a crush on JFK Jr. And, Steve Gillen was talking bad about JFK, and JFK Jr. was trying to educate him and say, like, no, this was my father's policy. I went and talked to this person who worked with my father, and this is exactly what he said. And then she said that that wasn't true. So by saying that, she's agreeing with the media that what they said about JFK and where he stood on his policies was the truth. JFK Jr. was asking someone who worked directly with his father what happened and what did my father want to do. And he corrected Stephen Gillen and they became friends after that. Um, so she's assuming that the media was correct about what JFK's policies were, rather than listening to what JFK Jr. told Steve, who, after speaking with someone who worked with JFK directly, um, she called George a stupid, unreadable magazine. I think there's lots of people who would disagree with that, especially now. She said that he never wrote his own editor's letters, that he would call on Stephen Gillen to write all of his editor's letters. Not true. I've read them all. He wrote most of them. The reason he would call on Stephen Gillen is for the fact that Stephen Gillen was a history buff. Like he knew all the stuff about history. So if he's going to write something about history or needed a little blurb about something, he's not going to go look it up himself. He didn't have Google back then. He would call in his friend Steven, who happily did it. So she's making a big deal out of nothing there. He did not have an original mind, she says. He did not have an original mind. Yet she goes on later to say that he had aspirations of founding a kayak company and also to have a dog leasing business, which she criticized as well. Um, Lots of people in the city wanted dogs but couldn't because they live in high rises. So I can see why he would want that, why he would think that that was a good idea. But that's not having an original mind. He didn't have any ideas at all. So the fact that he started George Magazine, which is marrying pop culture with politics, and she said that he didn't have an original mind, but yet he did that, which is literally the current state of politics.
Or the ways in which those two things were fusing. It was like they would interview politicians and then they would interview celebrities, and that was it. That was it. So it's like rip apart, like take half of Vogue magazine and half of what was then like a Time magazine, and then just sew that spine together, and that's basically the Frankenstein that was George.
We are marrying pop culture with politics. That is our current state of politics. He was ahead of his time by 10 plus years, but he didn't have an original mind. She said he was clumsy. Well, yeah, that's been documented. He was clumsy. He wasn't organized. Does that make him a bad person? I don't think so. I think there's lots of people in my life that are not organized. He never claimed to be a good athlete. She made fun of his athleticism, said he wasn't athletic. He never claimed to be a good athlete. In fact, he was very self-deprecating about a lot of things about himself. He was very down to earth about stuff like that. And I think if you read other books, not the ones that just are from the people furthest away from him, but the people who were like close to him, especially towards the end of his life when he was an adult and had grown out of those childhood qualms or whatever, selfishness, whatever she's trying to say. I think you would get that viewpoint of him. This is what I was so confused about. At one point, she said that his life was not under a microscope, that he was allowed to make mistakes, and that the press wasn't all over him, and that he was given time, chance after chance after chance, more than a normal person. But then she brings up the story about how JFK Jr. supposedly killed Daryl Hannah's dog. I read this story too. Um, and she's criticizing him for killing Daryl Hannah's dog, which was clearly a mistake. I mean, he was clearly an accident. I'm sure he felt terrible about it. But isn't that putting him under a microscope now in your 20-minute video? You're doing exactly what you said wasn't done to him back then. You're doing it now in 2025. You're putting his life under a microscope and criticizing his every mistake and every accident that ever befell on him. She said the magazine title of a magazine should tell you what it's about. She said that the name George was a stupid name. Okay, W, Dazed, Another, Purple, Tank, The Face, System. Those are all magazines. I have no idea what any of them are about, what the purpose of any of them are because of the names. I think that magazines, the whole point is to make you curious to read it. I'm sure people were wondering, what is George? Why did JFK Jr. start a magazine called George? What is it about? And so they would read. And if you would read the first editor's letter, which wasn't written by Stephen Gillen, by the way, you would know that it was about the first president. It says it right there in the editor's letter. And then the idea, she criticized the idea to put Cindy Crawford in George Washington, dress. And that's not JFK Jr.'s job. That was Matt Berman's job. He's the creative director. So she's misguiding her anger onto JFK Jr. Obviously, JFK Jr. okayed it, but that was Matt Berman's job. At one point, she brought up the accident with Mary Jo Kopechny. I don't know how to say her last name, but that was not even with JFK Jr. That had nothing to do with JFK Jr., so she brought that up as well. I think this entire 20-minute video is just a Kennedy bashing video. But, his life is not under a microscope, so it's fine. Like, it makes no sense what she just did in this 20-minute video. So here's what I wrote. I just said the entire point of the video is to paint him in a horrible light. I took note of the fact that those closest to him spoke highly of him, while those who were furthest out painted him in not a good light. So think about that. Why would that be? Think very deeply about that. I read both of Rosie's books. Rosie was JFK Jr.'s executive assistant at George. And when they met, Rosie hated him. She thought he was a pompous asshole. And she wrote about that in her book. So how did she go from thinking he was a pompous asshole to becoming one of his best friends and working with him for all those years until 1999? If he was so dumb and so bad, why didn't the people who worked closely with him every single day say those things? Matt Berman didn't write that. He worked with JFK Jr. every day. Why did Rosie say that positive things about him in her books? The thing is, I'm pretty sure that if all of our exes and our previous employers or random people we've ever pissed off throughout our lives wrote a book about us after we're long gone, I'm pretty sure they would paint our lives in a way that is nothing like who we really are. And I don't think that's a really hard concept for most people to understand, but clearly Maureen can't, it's not getting through to her. I don't know why. So I know that there's certain people in my life, if they wrote a book about me, they would paint me as this person, and this person would paint me as this person. It just, especially when I was younger, we're all selfish and idiots when we're younger. Then we grow up and we mature. And I think that's kind of what JFK Jr. did. So she's focusing on his previous years when, bad mistakes, bad relationships, whatever. And she's using that to paint him and saying that was him. So it's just weird. Again, saying that he wasn't under a microscope, but yet in this video, all she does is put him under a microscope and criticize his every move. Honestly, I couldn't figure out why she had so much hatred and animosity to someone she's never met. But then later on, I think it clicked. She said, he's only famous because he's gorgeous. Like at one point in the documentary, it said something like he was born and he was like the most famous person ever. And she said the only reason that he was the most famous is because he was gorgeous and he had a perfect body and whatever else she said. So she admits that she finds him attractive. The rest of what she says in this word vomit of a video, now that I know she thinks he's hot, just makes me wonder how many hot guys denied her in her life to make her go that psycho on JFK Jr. in her video. It's honestly like she's taking every single rejection she's had in her life and just pouring it onto JFK Jr. That's what it feels like to me. When I watched it, I was like, this doesn't even feel like we're talking about JFK Jr. anymore. Who are we talking about here? I don't understand. It's perfectly okay to voice your opinion about what you think. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm responding to your response to the CNN documentary. What she said, none of it made any sense. Um, I can sit there and criticize anyone's life based on the mistakes they've made, but the people closest to JFK Jr. painted him as this person, that he was a good person, clumsy, yes, unorganized, absolutely. Um, Not athletic. He never claimed to be an athlete, never once, never went out and said, I'm the best athlete in the world. Just liked to play sports, liked to be active. And yes, he liked danger. And there's a difference between trying to, she said something like he was trying to kill his ex-girlfriend Christina in a rapids, in the rapids water or whatever. There's a difference between that and like just being fun and trying fun things. I mean, I've had people like that are like, we're gonna go do this. And I'm like, no, no, I don't think I should do that. And then I do it and I'm like, wow, that was so much fun. Thank you for making him, getting me out of my comfort zone. That's how I felt like Chris. I read that account too by Christina, and that's what I took from it. Not that he was reckless, but that he would pull her out of her comfort zone to do things that would help her live her life, like that would, fill her with life, if that makes sense. So this is just my quick response to Maureen's video. I had found it very hard to watch, not only because I obviously love George Magazine, and a lot of people love George Magazine, but just the way she spoke about someone that she's clearly never met with such hatred. And at one point, she said something about George Magazine and how it was failing, and she looked at the camera and she's like, "Failing magazine!" Like she was angry, like she was trying to really, really convince us that it was a failing magazine. We know that it struggled. Why that extra emotion about it? What is that all about? Makes no sense. So I think I know why, but I'll leave that to myself. So I hope you all have a great rest of your day. And if you're looking for something to uplift you, it's not going to be Maureen's video. It's not. So I'll talk to you guys soon.